This is Talk Over Tea,
a place for a casual conversation about life in local government.
With Kassandra
and Claudel Frederic,
elected officials from the city of Amesbury, Massachusetts.
Relax with us for a moment. The tea is hot.
This is fun. I've been enjoying our time together.
Yeah, it's good.
On the pod.
I feel like I learned so much.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
Hopefully everyone listening is learning something too.
Yeah.
And we didn't lose them after the last episode. We got like really into the budget for a minute. So we'll kind of run with that though this episode too.
Yeah.
Yeah, can we talk more about that?
About school a little bit more?
Yeah. So we were talking, I think when we left off, we had talked a little bit about where the money goes, right? So when you look at your city or town's budget, how the money is divided among the departments and other expenses. And we said typically in a city or town, you're going to see a school department with its own schools. About 50% of the budget's going to go to the school department. But let's talk about who controls that part of the budget.
Right.
Because in Amesbury, if we can talk about my experience, I prepare our budget and I present it to the city council. And now you all get to review that through hearings and you actually approve and set the budget. But I don't prepare the school department's budget. So it's half of our budget and it gets sort of plugged in and then the council gets to make some decisions. But
I think that's.
But
been
how
a
does
big
it get to? Yeah,
though.
how does it get there? Let's talk about the process.
Yeah, I feel like that's been a big misconception where people overall think it's pretty much you as the mayor making all the decisions.
Yeah.
For both the school and the city. Where that's not the case. It's two separate budgets.
Right.
That's being presented. Superintendent presents her budget.
Yeah.
And you present your budget.
Yeah.
And it's never going to be the same.
Yeah, it can be the same.
Yeah.
And it has been the same before. So I've been in office, this is my 5th year, and I've had, I think, 1, maybe 2 years where we presented the same number.
Okay.
So a lot of people think that I'm in charge of the school department. They think, well, the mayor's at the top, they're in charge of everything.
Right.
But our school department really is separate. It's governed by the school committee. They have their own policies. And for Amesbury, we're a board of 7. And we oversee the budget. We oversee policy. And we hire and fire a few different positions, but in particular, the superintendent. So as the mayor, I don't actually supervise the superintendent. In some ways, we're equals if you think about us as executives and overseeing departments. But our superintendent answers to a board of 7. We all have the same equal vote. I do sit on the school committee. I happen to be the chair, but I still only have 1 vote out of those 7.
So is it mostly school committee that controls or that's in charge of what happens with the school's budget or how things are allocated? Right.
So just like council, the school committee votes on the budget. We vote on transfers between cost centers and sort of manage that. The day-to-day operations and the paying of invoices and things like that happen by our business manager under the supervision of our superintendent. But the school committee sets the budget and then or approves, recommends the budget to the council. So they do take a vote. They have their own budget hearings and manage the budget. So what we do in Amesbury, because it is different in different communities, our school committee gets a recommendation from the superintendent, has hearings and makes decisions and takes a vote, sets a final recommendation on the budget. And then, and I, as a member, abstain from all of those votes.
Okay.
Because it happens really early in the season. They have to, by charter, and we'll talk about our charter, but they have to, by charter, give me their budget recommendation 30 days prior to when I have to submit a budget to the council.
As a mayor.
Yeah. So their hearings happen really early. It's just too early for me to know where all the other departments are, what our revenues are going to be. Even after I submit my budget, we still don't have revenues from the state. So there's a lot of assumptions being made. So I abstain from the school committee votes because I don't want to take a vote on a budget that I can't endorse later. So the school committee takes a vote, and that is their recommendation for a budget. And then I put a number in my overall citywide budget for the mayor's recommendation. So as a counselor, you have two budget recommendations. You have the school committee and you have the mayor. And so that's why you said you get two numbers, and a lot of times they're not going to be the same number. They can be. And in some communities, it's always the same number. But it depends on what's going on that year, where where things are, what the numbers are looking like. And in Amesbury, in particular, we have adopted a Mass General law that allows us to submit two different numbers and for the council to select any number basically in between. You can't add, but you can subtract, you can reduce. So typically in this situation where you're gonna have two numbers, the school committee will be the higher number, and that sort of sets your ceiling, and you could cut, you could go below that, but that's basically your highest number, and then you'll have the mayor's recommendation as an alternative. In the last couple of years where we've had that discrepancy, the council has fallen somewhere in the middle. But I have to present a balanced budget, and I have to think about all of our departments and all of their needs and what the revenues are going to look like. So my submission is based on that. And, our school committee, and again, I sit on the school committee, but I know that when they take their, everything into consideration, make their recommendation, they're conscious of the fiscal realities that we have, but also take their role seriously in advocating for our students. Right. And sometimes our needs exceed our abilities. So
how long have you been on the school committee?
I have been, I'm in my 5th year. Right. So when I took office, the charter for the city articulated that the mayor was automatically the chair of the school committee. So I served as chair for 2 years before our charter changed. I think it was just 2 years.
And you were still voted or nominated.
And then, so then the charter changed and said the mayor is not automatically the chair, but the group gets to vote on a chair. And then they kept voting me to be the chair. So I'm still chair. Got it. Okay. But I don't have to automatically be the chair.
And you don't find it challenging to be the chair of the school committee during budget season? Or it sounds like you kind of have a system in place.
Yeah, that's something that's different in every community too, whether the mayor is or is not, and towns too, whether the administrator is or is not on the school committee, and then whether or not they're the chair. And so everyone has a different experience, and I kind of can't imagine not being the chair. Right. It's nice because I have a built-in relationship with the superintendent, so I control the agenda. I don't say control, but if I want something to be on the agenda and I want her to talk about it in a public meeting, I can say, hey, we've got to talk about this. We have a reason to talk because we got to cover business, and people do come to me with questions, and so there's a built-in relationship there. If I wasn't the chair, I may not have as much communication with her.
I could see that being some really bad turmoil with the mayor and superintendent not being kind of on the same page. Right. In regards to how things flow in the city. Yeah. Is there points where you guys literally have to communicate, like let's say, for example, like snow days or things like that? Do you guys find yourself communicating like prior to like the snow day happening to kind of like get on the same page as far as like what's going to happen in the next couple days, or how does that work? That's
a good question. That's a good example. We have a snow team chat that I started. I don't know that happened that way before, but I started. I'm also a very hands-on mayor, so I'm part of that conversation. I don't think mayors have to be part of that conversation. But we have our public safety officials in there. So like the fire chief, the police chief, the public works director, the superintendent. And then we have buildings that are standalone and have directors. So the library and the council on aging, so that we can all be on the same page about which buildings are opening, which ones are not, based on how DPW is doing with snow clearing. And our priority is the schools. So we have the superintendent in there so we can get a sense of what she's hearing from other districts, the decision that she makes, and then how DPW can react and what we need to do. Right. So if if she's going to have a delay, then we probably need to delay the opening of our city buildings because, we need to let DPW clear those lots and make sure that the schools are safe to open before they worry about City Hall.
Right. Okay.
So
priority.
Yeah, exactly. So we do make sure we're communicating about that. We have a weather service that gives us a report. Our public works director sort of manages that and, obviously manages the response from our contractors, the folks who are out plowing and shoveling, and can tell us how they're doing, how they're keeping up, what the roads are like, and if we need to make closures. So he sort of drives that conversation, and then we make decisions sort of collectively. So again, I don't think the mayor has to be part of that conversation. I happen to be involved in that and making the call on our city buildings. But that doesn't necessarily have to be a connection that the mayor and the superintendent have. But I do think because I'm the chair of the school committee, I have a great relationship with our superintendent. So we do communicate about a lot of things that are going on. And we've built some really collaborative, coalitions, groups, teams around school safety, response, the partnership with Amesbury Community Teens, which we've talked about. We've been able to work really well on things sort of outside of school committee and just making sure that our community is well connected for people of all ages. But yeah,
sounds pretty beneficial.
You don't have to be the chair. So, and one of the benefits too about being the chair is, by Robert's rules, you talk last and you're supposed to really pass the gavel to deliberate and participate in meetings. So, as the chair, I really just manage the meeting, which is just helpful, because I think the other members of the school committee really bring a lot of perspective, and they ran to be on school committee.
Right.
Mine's sort of a de facto position, so it enables them to engage in that discussion and debate in a way
really
that
voice their opinions,
and sort of lets me just manage.
Yeah.
So I think that's a benefit too.
Got it.
Yeah.
This is good. I feel like it's good. It sounds like overall it benefits the city to have that relationship.
I think so. So I think it's really helpful. I love getting into the schools. I love doing things with the students. It's helpful to know what's going on. It's helpful to be involved and get to know some of the staff and other members of the team over there. Budget season gets a little bit, it gets a little bit intense.
Yeah, budget season definitely gets intense around the schools and the city. For sure.
It does. And
and it's not just Amesbury. I mean, everybody's dealing with tight constraints. To be honest, I gotta be really honest right now. I would say the budget is trash. And also the
this
support.
This is unfiltered.
Listen, the support. I feel like the support from the state is also not that great either. I'd say it's hard. The trash can.
It's the trash cans. Yeah.
So
it's hard. We're seeing continued declines in state aid, and then we rely on taxpayers. So not only are your taxes going up because your values are going up and the cost of everything is going up, but you're also paying a bigger piece of the pie because our other revenues are down. And so I think that, it just compounds the issue. And we've talked about sort of, go to your budget book for your city or town and look at where the money is going, understand your revenues. And we haven't really taken more of a deep dive into that, but look at where that money is coming from. And we have in our budget book a historical sort of look at our revenues. And you can see that state aid declining and the pressure on the tax revenue increasing, the local taxpayers. And so that's why something like new growth, which we've covered, is really important, right? To help spread out that burden, make sure there's more people to pay the bill, right? More people to divide that by, and that the values are increasing because that's how it's calculated. That's how your bill's calculated. So it gets, I feel like I sort of hibernate from like February to May while we hash it all out and get ourselves out of this season. And, sometimes it's okay to do less and you can actually do it better, which is
the
hard.
Actual fiscal season end.
Yeah, doesn't ever. So our fiscal year, our fiscal year starts July 1st.
Yep.
So you, as a counselor, you have to vote and approve our budget by the end of June. We have to have a budget in place by June 30th, and in order to start the fiscal year on July 1st.
July 1st.
So that's our fiscal year here. There's federal fiscal years, there's calendar years, there's all kinds of things, but we start on July 1st. So our department heads start writing the budget in January. I usually start the year off with a Happy New Year, time to write your budget memo. Yeah. And we're in it pretty full throttle through the first week of June when hearings and debate sort of wrap up.
It's been intense.
Yeah. And that's why I say, like, does it ever really end? Our revenues aren't certified by the state until the fall, which is when we set the tax rate. And then everyone gets their first actual tax bill in January. And so your first 2 tax bills of the fiscal year, so we do quarterly tax bills here. Your first 2 tax bills are an estimate. I don't know if people understand that. So your first 2 tax bills are an estimate based on last year. So people get those first 2 bills and they're like, oh, my taxes really didn't go up. This is great. And then they get a January bill and it feels like it went up a lot, but we are making up for 2 quarters of no increase. So you're getting an annual increase and you're paying it in the 2 bills. Does that make sense?
Say that again.
Yeah.
One more time.
So in Amesbury, you get 4 bills.
Yes.
In a fiscal year. The first 2 are estimates. So they're based on last year. So you essentially see no increase.
Yep.
The next 2 would hold your increase for the whole year.
Yes.
So you're taking a year's worth of increase and you're paying it in only 2 bills.
2 bills, okay.
That's why it feels like a lot.
Once you get that 3rd bill, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So you get that January bill. So so our revenues are certified in the fall. We set our tax rate. So that's our new tax rate. It's based on the new budget, which was adopted in June. So by September, it feels kind of like disconnected.
Yep.
We sort of feel like a lot of time has gone by. So we'd set that tax rate really in December, so we can send out January bills, and that January bill carries the new rate and your new amount due.
Got it.
Yeah.
And this is also something we're going to need to chat about, the tax rate.
Yes.
At some point, we will definitely need to chat about when the tax rate is adopted.
Yeah, we'll talk about it we'll talk about that in December when we get a tax rate.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's why the fiscal year just sort of, it's ongoing, but we'll set the budget for July 1st, and then when those revenues are certified, it can change things a little bit, and that's why we don't have that rate in July. We don't have it until December in the fall when when everything is really settled, and then we start all over again in January. And so
just to kind of give people a reminder about the revenue being certified, please break that down. I know it ends June 30th, and then by the beginning of July, by the fall, it has to be certified, correct?
Yeah. So the State Department, the DOR certifies our revenues. So we go through and estimate our revenues. We have, we have fees, we have penalties, we have local options taxes. So we have here like a hotel motel tax. We have a cannabis excise tax. We have a meals tax. So we have all of these. When you look at our revenue pie chart, you'll see property tax, right? And then you'll see state aid, and then you'll see sort of like other revenue, and you'll see like fees. So those things there's a lot of things that kind of go into those other buckets. So we have to make estimates on what those revenues are going to be. We use historic actuals in order to estimate those, and trends to see. So, hotel motel taxes, for instance, around the pandemic, they were not performing as they had been prior to the pandemic. So we had to adjust our expected revenue from those accounts or from those sources. So we have to make informed decisions about what those estimates that income and revenue will look like. So we do that in order to present you a budget in June, because when we present you with expenses, which is really what you spend most of your time looking at, there has to be an equal amount of revenue to make it balance.
Right.
But we spend all our time talking about expenses.
Right.
So we have made estimates on revenue. once the state sets their budget, we can fill in what that revenue looks like
based on what they're actually
what they actually approve for a budget. So that's sort of one of the first shoes to drop is what our actual state revenue looks like. And then the rest is that all those other local sort of revenues, and those get certified for December by the state. So they look at those to see if our estimates are reasonable, there hasn't been any significant increase, right? We also get fees from building permits and things like that. So for instance, we've mentioned Munters before. Their permit fees to build that building are pretty substantial.
Right.
If we had last year, and we didn't know in time, but if last year we had budgeted for that, it would have been a huge increase in our expected revenue for permit fees. And the state would have said, what's happening, right? Where'd you get that number?
Right.
And we would have had to justify that. So
you have to be pretty conservative.
We have to be pretty conservative, right? And if the state sends anything back, so we'll take hotel motel tax, for instance. Say we're expecting $400,000. And maybe this year we're like, you know what? Tourism is back. We think there's going to be a lot more, folks in those hotels. We're actually going to put in $450, but we haven't really been seeing the 400 that we thought. We're just thinking this year's going to be like a really good year, and we kind of needed the money, so we're going to put in 450. When the state looks at that, if they say, I don't think so, nothing is indicating to us that you're going to get 450. You've got to bring that back to 400.
Right.
We've already set our expenses. So now we're $50,000 in the hole for revenue. And the only place to go for that is the taxpayer.
Got it.
Right? So that's the tax, I'm going to say tax levy, which is like a whole nother thing. We haven't really defined the levy. That's a whole different episode. But the only place to go for that is the taxpayer.
Got it.
And so that's why we haven't set the tax rate, because we don't really know where all the other revenue is or is certified before we basically take what's left and say, okay, the rest of this is the responsibility of the taxpayer.
Got it.
So we certify everything else first, and then we go to the taxpayer in December, and that's why you get a January bill.
Got it.
So it's really a year-long process. There's a lot
ongoing.
To it. Yeah.
So real quick, as far as you being conservative with your budget,
I
feel like this is but this is really the part that council plays as far as kind of being second eyes, right? And really making sure, like, are they really being realistic here? Is administration really being realistic here? Or is this just like absurd? So it's kind of like, did they cross their T's and dot their I's?
Yeah.
Because it helps, you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, we are all looking out for the betterment of the city and the people, right? So we kind of give it a second look, and then we have the big guy, the state. Yeah. That really gives it that final look. So, and I think obviously in the future we'll talk about that council and administration and mayor relationship. But that's kind of like where I see like the balance is. It's kind of like, all right, there's a give and, there.
Yeah, I think you could think about this, the city council as really being the ones to review the expenses, like how we spend our money. And the revenue, the state really looks at the revenue to say, like, where are you getting your money? And are you setting yourself up for success, right? They don't want cities and towns to be in the negative.
Right.
They don't want you to be overestimating your revenue.
Right.
So they check that to make sure that everyone is
definitely on point. Right.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So you're looking at the expenses, and where that money is going and ensuring that, we're delivering for the citizens and we're, on our budget matches our plans. We've talked before about sort of like the overall plans and goals of the city, and that those two are coinciding. Coinciding, or right, they're not in conflict, right? That we're putting money where we want to put money, and sort of use those hearings to take people's feedback and learn from that. You're reviewing our expenses.
But again, I think you said something very important, taking people's feedback. So this is exactly where people need to understand, hey, this is your time to kind of step in and be like, why is our money going there and not there? Or can we do this instead of that? But they are public hearings.
Yes. I don't know have you been surprised by the public participation?
I feel like I wish there was more.
Right.
Like
people
it's usually like maybe 2-3 people in the room.
Yeah. People don't really participate in these hearings. And even if you don't feel like you have anything to say, and maybe you're watching online, but I think watching is really informative. Every department head goes through, for the most part, a line by line budget and says, this is how much I need for training, and these are the conferences we're going to go to.
Right.
And, this is the money I need for consulting, and these are the people we use, or this is the type of work that we do, or this is the money I need for advertising, and this is what we spend it on.
Right.
So they really go through. So if you're someone who's saying, you get that, if you're the person who gets your bill in January and says, why are my taxes so high? Where does the money go? This is what you need to be involved in, or just watch these budget hearings where they really do talk in detail about where that money goes. And the hearing is your chance to ask those questions and say, what I didn't hear you say was X, or I really, all year long I complain about, or I have a problem with trees, right? That we have all these trees, and that's a common problem for so many communities right now, is we have an aging canopy. And it's a lot of money to take trees down. So I really wish there was more money in the tree budget. Right. We hear about it all the time. I really wish that was increasing. It is increasing this year's budget, but that's the type of thing that you can do during this season.
And I think people also need to understand too, not just any tree. Sometimes it has to be a tree that's owned by the city.
Yes,
not
it has to be. Remember?
Tree. Yeah, you know what I mean? Or,
remember we talked about public and private property? We can't spend public funds on private property. That's not just for roads, it's for trees and fences trees and things
also.
too. Yeah.
I'd say the best way to sum this up, I really hope people spend less time complaining and more time getting themselves informed, because they could do so much more. That's really
I hope that take the opportunity to learn from, again, the budget process is, it's a lot for us. We spend a lot of late nights together in City Hall, and it's a little grueling to go in detail, but it's really, to me, it's kind of the best time of the year, because it's when we really pull back the curtain for everyone. Like these are department heads that you may not see very often. Not every department head is someone that comes to council on a regular basis, or who's out in the public or holds public meetings. So you get to see who they are, and you get to hear about their work. And a lot of them, what they do is just sort of the nuts and bolts of government. And
they put in
you kind of just take advantage of it for the fact that it happens. So giving them the chance to get up there and sort of talk about it and share, even if it's a $300 office supply budget, and they tell you they buy paper clips.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, they're passionate about they're passionate about their department, and it's great to see all the departments that take part in running this city. You know? I found myself turning to the left and saying to one of the counselors, wow, this is really intriguing. I'm kind of enjoying this, you know what I mean? Yeah. But it's because you get to see and understand everything that is happening as far as money being spent, money coming in. And if you're going to complain at that point, rightfully so. You know what I mean? Other than that, I can't respect the complaint. But so.
Well, this became very much a budget conversation.
Right.
Which is just top of mind for us. It's that time of year. And again, I hope that folks take advantage of the opportunity to get involved and learn more. And it's a great way to find out what's going on in your community. Again, meet the people who are making decisions.
Right.
And we'll talk more in another episode, maybe about, our organizational structure, our sort of guiding documents. We've talked a little bit about
the charter.
We'll talk about the charter. We talked about the schools versus the mayor versus city council. So the city council gets to make some budgetary decisions. We've already said they can't add, but they can reduce.
Right.
And they've got some choices between city and school, or mayor and school recommended school budgets, which is unique to Amesbury. Not every city has that or has adopted that general law. So we'll have more budget news in the coming weeks, but we won't bore you with too much budget conversation. So yeah, we'll talk about some other things that help guide our city and things that you should know about coming up. But I think that's probably a good deep dive into the budget for today. What's deep. Going on right now in our world. More,
but thank you for everybody joining us. For real.
Yeah. Hopefully that was helpful.
This was a deep one. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. We'll come back again for more talk over tea in the future. Right. All right. Cheers.